this episode was a lot more complex. Back then, well, my first binge watch was mostly focusing on one of the critiques of the show and the problems centering around it. But since that those critiques didn't bother me like they used to when it came to thinking that the show was good or not, I can tell for a fact that this episode on its own really shows that there was a lot more going on other than Lapis being mean to Peridot. From the events from the last episode, Barmaid centers around Peridot trying to be nice towards Lapis, since that they need to share the bond together, but at the same time Lapis is having none of that, especially knowing that Peridot was her enemy from the finale of Season 1, and she has no trust whatsoever, unlike her trust towards Steven. This episode really showcased that Lapis can't be able to trust anyone unless if that someone is Steven. And to tell you the truth, with her trust towards Peridot being way lower, probably lower than the Crystal Gems, is an indication that she really wants the bond to herself, and the fact that Peridot is willing to try everything, but at the same time, she's also still growing adjustment towards life on Earth. Steven tries to help Peridot, but at the same time, none of the techniques that they do work whatsoever due to the state that Lapis is in. And as far as I'm concerned, I can easily tell that this relationship between Peridot and Lapis would have had more screen time, but whenever I think about this episode and witnessing what Lapis went through, Lapis isn't really the friend type, or in this case, barmaid type, while Peridot is trying to be all that. The biggest scene in this entire episode is where Steven and Peridot made a small pool for Lapis to swim in, but this also gave her trauma on her being stuck under the ocean with Jasper. Let's be totally real. If we actually saw what she was been doing in the fusion with Jasper as Malachite in Season 2, it would have been a lot more darker, and just by seeing this image alone, really shows that Peridot offended her with the wrong reasons. I'm really getting the impression that the people who made this show didn't want Lapis to be like any other swimming girl from any other cartoon. Because if that was the case, then it's nice for her to befriend Peridot, well, not really befriend, but mainly grew a relationship with her, but at the same time, her development wouldn't mean much knowing of how that her trauma is mainly a big factor of her development. That quote, "Water was the tomb I lived in for those months," is one of the most memorable quotes that I've heard from this show. Not because it's hilarious of the irony behind it, but it's the fact that Lapis is really in a state that it's gonna take months to recover from the trauma that she went through during her forced and toxic relationship with Jasper. But then again, it's not really fair towards Peridot, considering that Lapis is being mean towards her and she's just trying to make things right and trying to change for the better. And believe me, if Peridot was interacting with one of the beach city citizens, it would probably work out. But at the same time, when it comes to a gem like Lapis, it's beyond forgiving her for being a better person than what she was early on. Let me just say that with this situation centering around Lapis and Peridot, it's honestly what people would do if they were sharing the same bedroom or house together when they can't get along, with the other person having a disadvantage of not being able to afford where they should go other than the place that they refuse to stay, and the fact that the person who owns the place didn't technically own the place, but that's mainly if you want to replicate real life towards this episode, is trying too hard to be nice towards you, but at the same time you can understand their meaning on trying to be as nice as possible. Then again, I really feel like that if Peridot didn't do any of this stuff in order to be nice towards Lapis, I'm pretty sure it would put her in a more difficult position on having a bond with someone else, knowing full well that the other person will be really rude towards her. For how this episode is structured when it comes to people's opinions, positive or negative, I've come to the conclusion that this episode was ahead of its time when they're trying to make Lapis a different character in comparison to Peridot. Because once Peridot leaves after taking Lapis's request, well, not really request, but order, she ends up running back because one of the ships, the Roaming Eye, has been spotted her after Peridot betrayed Yellow Diamond. So, in all honesty, with how Lapis makes up for Peridot by saving her, thanks to one of her powers, I have to admit that the ending itself is mainly a work in progress. Granted, it would have been nice to see more of the dynamic of Lapis and Peridot, but at the same time, I'm getting the impression that, despite with the many Beach City episodes, what happens off-screen centering around Lapis is probably for the best. Believe me, it would have been interesting to see these two, but to tell you the truth, I'm really thinking that Lapis is just not like Peridot. And for me, liking Lapis more than Peridot during my first binge watch, it really shows that saving this marathon for now is really the best decision. With that being said, this is one of the most unique episodes from Steven Universe when it comes to the point of view of Lapis herself. But then again, you will probably have the point of view of Peridot at the same time, or separate from Lapis. I'm giving this episode an 8.5 out of 10.